Wolves fans, today we've got two stories to talk about. And I'm telling you right now, they hit two completely different sides of what Minnesota is trying to build. First, there's some frustrating news involving the Wolves' pursuit of another major piece. Minnesota clearly sees a need on this roster after all the changes this offseason, and there's a player out there who looks like he could help fill it. The interest is real. The problem is that once you look at what it would actually take to make this happen financially, things get complicated very quickly. And honestly, this is one of those situations where you can see exactly what the Wolves want to do, while also wondering if there's any realistic path to actually doing it. But then the second story completely changes the energy. Because something is happening with this new-look Wolves group before training camp even begins. After all the frustration we saw last season, all those moments where the team just looked irritated, disconnected, or mentally drained when games weren't going their way, there are already signs that this year could feel very different. New relationships are forming, guys are spending time together away from the season, and there's a different kind of chemistry starting to show up. And for a team with championship expectations, that matters more than people realize. So we need to get into both stories today, because one shows just how difficult the next roster move could be, while the other might give us a reason to feel really good about where this team is heading. And before we get into it, if you love talking Wolves basketball every single day, hit that like button and subscribe. I'm Henry, this channel is still brand new, and our first goal is to build this thing to 1,000 subscribers. But seriously, only subscribe if you're a real Timberwolves fan, because I want the people who join us this early to be able to look back someday and say they were here from the beginning. Now, let's talk about what's going on in Minnesota. Alright, Wolves fans, now let's get into that first story, because this is where things get frustrating. The player we were talking about is Jonathan Kuminga. According to Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype, Kuminga has drawn interest from the Minnesota Timberwolves, Cleveland Cavaliers, and Los Angeles Lakers. And the Atlanta Hawks haven't completely closed the door either. They've reportedly looked into bringing Kuminga back after declining his team option and allowing him to become an unrestricted free agent. And from Minnesota's perspective, the interest makes a lot of sense. This roster has changed dramatically after the Wolves moved on from Julius Randle and Nez Reid this offseason. That creates a real need for somebody who can play power forward, bring athleticism, attack the basket, and give this team another scoring option. Kuminga checks a lot of those boxes. Now, he's a little undersized if you're asking him to play the 4 consistently, but at this stage of the offseason, finding a player with his physical tools and upside still sitting on the market is naturally going to get your attention. And John Kravchinski of The Athletic confirmed that Minnesota is interested. But here comes the bad news. Money. That's the problem. Kravchinski explained that when a player becomes available at a position Minnesota needs, of course the Wolves are going to explore it. But according to him, Minnesota's realistic financial path to Kuminga is extremely limited. The Wolves can essentially offer him a minimum contract in the scenario Kravchinski described, and that is nowhere close to what Kuminga's camp appears to be looking for. Michael Scotto has also reported that Minnesota still has its $6.06 million taxpayer mid-level exception available. But even that doesn't solve the problem, because according to reporting from Cleveland.com, Kuminga is looking for somewhere around $15 to $20 million per season. Think about that gap. Even if Minnesota puts that taxpayer mid-level exception on the table, we're talking about roughly $6 million compared with a player reportedly seeking $15, maybe $20 million annually. That's not a small disagreement you negotiate your way through over dinner. That is a completely different financial universe. And Kravchinski basically admitted that he just doesn't see a realistic avenue for Minnesota to get involved if Kuminga refuses to come down significantly from his asking price. That's disappointing because I understand why Wolves fans would look at Kuminga and get excited. He's still young. He has ridiculous athletic ability. We've seen flashes where you watch him and think, man, if somebody can finally put this guy in the right situation and get consistency out of him, there's something there. But his last season was another reminder that the Jonathan Kuminga experience comes with questions. After a long negotiation the previous summer, Kuminga signed a 2-year, $48.5 million deal with the Golden State Warriors. He started Golden State's first 12 games before an injury, and another change in Steve Kerr's rotation sent him back to the bench. And once again, it felt like that relationship between Kuminga and Kerr was going nowhere. Kerr appeared to lose trust in him, and Kuminga played only 8 more games for Golden State before the Warriors finally moved him at the trade deadline. Golden State sent Kuminga and Buddy Hield to the Atlanta Hawks and received Kristaps Porzingis in return. And once Kuminga got to Atlanta, we did see some of that potential again. In 16 games for the Hawks, Kuminga averaged 12.3 points, 5.3 rebounds, and 2.1 assists. Then he gave Atlanta a little more in the playoffs. Against the New York Knicks in the first round, Kuminga averaged 13.7 points, and he played a meaningful role in helping Atlanta take a 2-1 series lead. Of course, New York eventually caught fire, turned the series around, and went on to win the championship. But Kuminga showed enough that you understand why teams are still interested. There's a reason Warriors owner Joe Lacob was so enamored with his potential going all the way back to 2021. The talent has never really been the question. The question is how much you're willing to pay for that talent when you still don't completely know what Kuminga becomes long-term. And that's where I have to side with Minnesota being careful here. Would I like Jonathan Kuminga on this Wolves roster? Absolutely. Would I like him at $15 to $20 million per year when Minnesota would have to get extremely creative just to make the finances work? That becomes a much tougher conversation. So, unless Kuminga's market changes dramatically or some other opportunity opens up financially, this feels like one of those situations where the Wolves can be genuinely interested without being genuinely close to getting the player. And now, let's move to our second story, because this one has a completely different feeling. This one actually has me excited. Because for all the talk about talent, trades, contracts, and rotations, there was another problem with this team last season that everybody watching the Wolves could see the mood. When things were good, everything looked fine. But when games started getting ugly, man, sometimes you could feel the energy disappear. The Wolves could look frustrated. They could look disconnected. They could look like an 82-game season was becoming a grind instead of something they were enjoying together. And this wasn't just fans imagining things. Chris Finch himself has addressed it. In an interview with Christopher Hine, formerly of the Minnesota Star-Tribune, Finch discussed some of that moodiness from last season. But now, Finch has something very different entering this year: LaMelo Ball. And Finch specifically described Ball as having an infectious quality that matters. Because if you watched LaMelo during his years with the Charlotte Hornets, you know exactly what Finch means. The guy plays with personality, he smiles, he talks, he creates. He brings this loose energy to the floor. And apparently that energy is already connecting with Anthony Edwards. These two have gotten close fast. At Fanatics Fest, Edwards revealed that LaMelo had actually been staying at his house. I love hearing that. Because one concern after all these changes was how Anthony Edwards would respond emotionally. Especially after Minnesota traded away his close friend Nez Reid. But so far, those fears appear to be fading quickly. Ant and LaMelo are already building something together, and that relationship could become incredibly important. And remember, this is a younger Wolves team now. Mike Conley is gone. Kyle Anderson is gone. Joe Ingles is gone. Those were veteran personalities who had been around a long time. So somebody has to take on more responsibility as a leader. And one of the veterans who remains is Rudy Gobert. That brings us to something else I really like. Ball and Edwards have helped spearhead an effort to get members of the team together to work out in France with Gobert. Players have already been seen arriving in France. And Wolves fans, this is happening before training camp. That's the part that gets me. They don't have to wait until everybody reports and the coaches officially put them together. These guys are choosing to build chemistry now. And after watching this team battle through those emotional lulls during consecutive 82-game seasons, I don't think we should underestimate how valuable that can be. Minnesota has finished 49-33 in back-to-back seasons. That's obviously not a bad record. But with the talent this organization has had and the expectations around Anthony Edwards, 49 wins can still leave you feeling like something was missing. Especially when the Wolves came dangerously close to landing in the play-in tournament in both seasons. At the same time, they won 3 playoff series across those 2 postseason runs. So we know this team can compete. We know the ceiling is there. The challenge is finding more consistency during the marathon of the regular season, and chemistry can absolutely help with that. Look at the New York Knicks team that just won the championship. Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, and Josh Hart had relationships going all the way back to their time together at Villanova. Jose Alvarado arrived in February and still seemed to fit right into that group's personality and energy. That stuff matters. Basketball is obviously about talent, execution, coaching, and matchups. But these guys are human beings. When players genuinely enjoy being around each other, trust each other, and want to fight through bad stretches together, it can change how a team responds when things start going wrong. And Minnesota has more connections forming beyond just Ant and LaMelo. The twin turbos, Iota Senmu and Bones Highland, are still together. Jaden McDaniels has been getting work in with Edwards and Ball as well. And Jaden already has a long-standing close relationship with Anthony Edwards. So you're starting to see this network forming Edwards, Ball, Gobert, McDaniels, Dosunmu, Highland. Guys aren't just waiting for opening night to figure each other out, they're building this thing now. And there's another reason LaMelo is going to bring attention to Minnesota this season. The guy is just naturally entertaining. He recently went viral after being asked to name 3 people he would want to wear his shoes. His answer was Jesus, Martin Luther King Jr., and Malcolm X. And NBA fans immediately had a field day with it. Some people loved the answer. Others joked that you never really know what's going through LaMelo's head. One fan even compared the response to something Michael Scott from The Office would say. That's LaMelo. You never completely know what you're going to get when somebody puts a microphone in front of him. And pairing that personality with Anthony Edwards is going to be entertaining. You already know fans are waiting for those post-game interviews. Apparently, Ant and Melo know it too. During an interview with Taylor Rooks at Fanatics Fest, Edwards said the two have already talked about needing to cut back on the cursing and be a little more professional in their post-game interviews. Good luck with that, guys. Seriously. Part of what makes Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball so popular is that neither one has ever felt like some completely manufactured PR-trained NBA personality. They're funny because they feel spontaneous. So yes, be professional. Just don't take away everything that makes those two entertaining. LaMelo is also entering Minnesota with plenty to prove on the basketball side. Last season, he averaged 20.1 points, 4.8 rebounds, 7.1 assists, 1.2 steals, and 0.2 blocks per game. He's a former All-Star, but despite his individual talent and popularity, sustained team success has been missing from his NBA career. Now, he gets a very different opportunity with Minnesota. Chris Finch has already expressed excitement about the acquisition, and Ball gets to play alongside one of the league's biggest stars in Anthony Edwards. He's also still a huge name away from the court. Puma released his 6th signature sneaker, the MB-06 Puerto Rico, on July 31st, initially in Puerto Rico with a global release planned for September. Ball reportedly signed a multi-year deal worth $100 million with Puma back in 2020. Unlike his older brother Lonzo Ball, LaMelo chose not to wear their father LeVar Ball's big baller brand shoes in the NBA. And Puma's investment has clearly helped make LaMelo one of the most recognizable players among younger basketball fans. But now comes the part that actually matters to us: winning. This Wolves team doesn't need LaMelo Ball simply to sell shoes, create viral clips, or give us hilarious post-game interviews. They need him to help Anthony Edwards win basketball games. They need him to make Chris Finch's offense more dangerous. They need him to create easier opportunities for guys like Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert. And they need his personality to help this group survive those stretches of the season when everybody is tired, frustrated, and the schedule feels endless. That's why these two stories actually connect more than they might seem. On one side, Minnesota is still looking for ways to improve the roster, and Jonathan Kuminga is clearly interesting to them. But unless something changes financially, getting him appears extremely difficult. On the other side, the players Minnesota already has are doing something you cannot manufacture with a contract. They're connecting. Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball are building their relationship. Jaden McDaniels is getting work in with them. Rudy Gobert is getting teammates together in France. Ayo Dosunmu and Bones Highland already have their connection. And Chris Finch might be looking at a group that simply enjoys being around each other more than last year's team did. Now, does off-season chemistry guarantee a championship? Of course not. We still need to see these guys play. We need to see how Ball and Edwards share the basketball. We need to see how Finch handles the rotation. We need to see how Minnesota replaces what it lost with Julius Randle and Naz Reid. and we need to see whether the Wolves can turn all this talent and good energy into consistency over 82 games and then carry it into the playoffs. But I'd rather enter the season talking about guys voluntarily getting together and building chemistry than wondering why. Everybody looks miserable. This team has reached the point where expectations are serious. Anthony Edwards is too good for Minnesota to be satisfied with simply making the playoffs. 3 playoff series victories over 2 seasons are nice. But eventually, you have to take the next step. You have to start thinking about the finals. You have to start thinking about a championship. And if this new group can combine the talent of Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball with the defense and experience of Rudy Gobert, the versatility of Jaden McDaniels, and a locker room that genuinely enjoys competing together, then maybe this new chapter has a chance to become something special. I'm excited. I'm also watching that Kuminga situation because if his market somehow changes, I absolutely want Minnesota paying attention. But I don't want the Wolves forcing a move just because Jonathan Kuminga is available. Be patient, protect your flexibility, and if the right opportunity comes, then make your move. Now, I want to hear from you, Wolves fans. Would you still try to find a way to bring Jonathan Kuminga to Minnesota? Or is his reported asking price simply too high? And what about LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards? Do you believe this chemistry we're already seeing can translate into a legitimate championship run? Drop your opinion in the comments, because I really want to know where Wolves fans stand on this. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. It helps us keep building this community. 760 Years Daily News is still a brand new channel, and our first goal is 1,000 subscribers. But like I said earlier, don't subscribe just because I'm asking you to. Subscribe if you genuinely believe in following this journey with us. Talking basketball every day and being part of this community from the beginning. I'm Henry, and I'll see you guys in the next one.